When she admired the house by the lake, I smiled and said, "One day, it'll be ours." The red laser line dropped 2¼ inches across the porch roof. Before I could measure again, the timber above Elena's head gave a deep, splintering groan. "Step off the porch," I called. She froze with a manila envelope in one hand. "Now, Elena." The command in my voice reached her. She crossed the steps just as a strip of paint dust sifted from the beam and scattered across the boards where she'd been standing. The lake behind me was smooth enough to reflect the sunset, but the house had already begun to betray itself. Its 3 stories rose above the shoreline with warm windows, cedar siding, and a wraparound porch that looked peaceful from a distance. Up close, the front girder had bowed under the slate roof. The east foundation wall had opened along an old mortar joint, and the porch posts leaned in 3 different directions. I lowered the laser level and walked toward her. Elena had called me that afternoon for a paid emergency assessment. She had inherited the house from her grandfather 3 months earlier, along with a file of old repair estimates and a right of first refusal agreement he had signed with his son, Richard, during a period of illness. If the county condemned the house and Elena failed to complete approved repairs, Richard's development company could purchase the property at its reduced land value before she offered it to anyone else. He had already filed the hazard petition. The envelope in Elena's hand contained the county notice. "I have 14 days," she said. "After that, the county can order evacuation and start condemnation proceedings. Once that happens, Richard activates the agreement, buys the land, and tears the house down for 4 vacation units." "Who reviewed the structure before you moved in?" "No one. The estate attorney said the house had passed a basic occupancy check 2 years ago. That was before the foundation shifted. I called 3 general contractors. 1 refused the deadline. 2 said the engineering and permit review alone would take a month." She kept her voice controlled, but her thumb had worn a white line into the edge of the envelope. "Why not challenge the agreement first?" I asked. "My attorney filed for an injunction. The hearing is 5 weeks away." "Insurance suspended structural coverage until the hazard was cleared," she said. "And no bank will lend against a property under condemnation review. Legal, financial, and physical exits closed." Richard did not need to win an argument. He only needed the roof to keep falling. Built in 1912, the house still carried hand-cut braces, pegged frames, and stone from the far shore. Elena carried the same stubborn dignity, but skill and willpower could not outrun a failing beam or a legal clock. The county notice shook once in her hand when the wind crossed the lawn. "What happens if the porch fails before the hearing?" she asked. "The overhang could pull the east wall outward. Best case, you lose the front rooms. Worst case, the second floor follows it." Her eyes moved to the glowing windows. "My grandfather's drafting table is in that room. Then we keep the wall where it belongs." I looked up at the porch again. "I can stabilize it tonight," I said. "The permanent repair requires an engineer's stamped plan, an emergency permit, and a crew willing to work in shifts." "You have all 3? "I have an engineer who answers when I call, a county inspector who respects complete paperwork, and a foreman who will complain loudly while doing exactly what needs to be done." "That is not the same as saying yes." "No, this is—" I opened my field notebook and drew the existing load path. The failing girder carried the porch roof and part of the second floor overhang. Replacing it with a single 40-foot timber would require equipment we could not bring down the narrow lake road. A more realistic repair used 2 20-foot white oak timbers joined over a new central post, transferring the load to an interior pier tied into the stone foundation. The plan was only a concept until an engineer approved it. "I'll send these measurements to Priya Shah tonight," I said. "If she confirms the design, we file an emergency stabilization permit at 8 tomorrow morning. The county can suspend the condemnation clock while approved remediation is active. Elena studied the drawing. And the cost? I'll give you a formal deferred payment contract. 24 months, commercial interest, no ownership claim, no personal conditions. Your attorney can review every line before you sign. Her gaze lifted to mine. Why would you take that risk? Because I had spent 10 years building homes for people who cared more about resale photographs than the joints holding their roofs together. Because this house still carried hand-planed window trim, pegged frames, and pencil marks from the carpenter who built it, because Elena had called for help before pride turned the danger into tragedy. I gave her the practical answer. Because I accepted the inspection fee, and I don't walk away from a structure after I find an immediate hazard. The old beam groaned again. I set my tool case on the gravel. Do you have a working outlet? The kitchen circuit. Good. Call your attorney. I'm calling my engineer. Priya Shah answered on the third ring. By dusk, she had my photographs, laser readings, foundation measurements, and a video of the cracked joints. Marcus Reed, my foreman, arrived with shoring posts, steel plates, and hydraulic jacks. He looked from the roof to me. You said small emergency? I was optimistic. Elena came down carrying an extension cord. Before Marcus finished telling her where to run it, she had taped every crossing point flat against the siding. She stays outside the exclusion zone, I said. I heard that, Elena replied. Good, Marcus said. Saves time. Priya called back at 9. The design works, but the central bearing point needs a reinforced pier. No roof lift until the base plates are anchored. I'll deliver stamped drawings in the morning. And if the stone beneath the cracked mortar is unsound? I asked. Then you need a miracle. I don't stock those. That is why I answer your calls. We installed 4 shoring posts with diagonal braces. Elena aimed the work lights and logged every photograph Priya requested. Near midnight, her attorney confirmed the deferred payment contract contained no transfer rights or personal conditions. Elena signed. Only then did I touch the jacks. The girder rose less than 1/8 of an inch at a time. Old nails released with sharp cracks while Marcus watched the laser and I watched the pressure gauges. Left side is 3/4 low. I pumped once, the porch roof lifted. Another crack snapped through the dark. Elena stepped toward us, then stopped at the safety line. What broke? Nothing we need. Old nails shifting. When the laser finally leveled, I locked the valves and drove wedges above the posts. The roof settled onto the temporary frame. The house went quiet. From the dock, the roof no longer sagged like a tired shoulder. It was only temporary support. But Elena stared at the straight line as if the house had taken its first full breath in years. She pressed her palm to the post. My grandfather said this place told you when something was wrong. Tonight, it's saying it can wait until morning. Her gaze held mine. Then Marcus opened the thermos and tasted the coffee. She made it correctly, he said. Elena brushed dust from her grandfather's flannel. Caleb drinks it black. Marcus handed me the cup. She observed structural weaknesses. The county issued an emergency stabilization permit the next morning. It paused condemnation for 7 days, provided we passed each milestone. First came the foundation. Beneath the porch deck, the stone pier was wider than expected and sound below the frost line. Priya tested it, approved the anchor locations, and signed the detail. You have your foundation, she said. Elena's breath left her in a quiet rush. Priya pointed at the original trim. Lead paint. Use containment. Marcus glanced at me. Another small detail? I remain optimistic. Elena hid a smile behind her cup. The repair required 2 20-foot white oak beams, each just under 1,000 pounds. I had one cured in my shop. Marcus found the second at a restoration yard 2 counties away. Elena traded a set of commissioned illustrations for part of its cost. That evening she showed me her first sketch, the house before the damage. Every spindle and dormer drawn with exact lines. My grandfather taught me perspective on these steps, she said. He believed a drawing holds when every line agrees where the weight belongs. That sounds like carpentry. He would have liked you. My pencil stopped above the cut list. She looked back at the screen. I shifted the blueprint between us. The new post goes here. And this stops Richard? The final inspection does. This keeps the house standing until then. Over the next 3 days, Marcus and I removed the rotten girder while Priya inspected the hidden joists. Elena documented every stage, finished the restoration yard illustrations between tasks, and learned our coffee orders without asking twice. She labeled every salvaged fastener. Marcus held up one bag and said, "She has improved us." "She has judged us," I said. "Both can be true," Elena replied. Late that afternoon, the third porch step lifted under Elena's heel. While she met her attorney, I replaced it, matched the old profile, and swept the sawdust away. She stopped on the new tread when she returned. "You fixed this." "It was a fall hazard." "It wasn't in the contract." "Neither is watching you trip over it again." She tested it once, then looked at me. "Thank you." I checked the next measurement before the silence could change. Richard called the following morning. Elena put him on speaker. "My offer expires tonight," he said. 10% above land appraisal. Once the county red tags the property, that disappears. "The repairs permitted," Elena said. "For 7 days. Your local carpenter has opened the roof and a storm is coming." "My name is Caleb Foster," I said, keeping the framing square on the timber. "Use it when you discuss my work." "You are extending the inevitable, Mr. Foster." "The foundation milestone passed. The roof will not take the offer. Elena, you keep enough money to start over, and I spare you the demolition bill." "You keep the lakefront land." "That is business." "No. Business would have been releasing the contractor records grandfather requested." The line went still. "You have no proof I withheld anything," Richard said. "Then bring the records to the county hearing." She ended the call. Wind scraped through the pines. "He speaks as if leaving his mercy," she said. "Do you want the offer?" "No." The answer arrived before the question ended. She picked up the chalk line. "Show me the 10 and shoulder." We worked until sunset. At dusk, I found Elena alone on the dock with Richard's offer glowing on her phone. The number was enough to erase her debt and buy a smaller life somewhere else. "Tell me refusing certainty isn't foolish," she said. Across the lake, the porch lights broke into gold fragments. "I can tell you what the structure can bear," I said. "I can't decide what you should surrender." She looked back at the house. This was the only address that stayed the same when everything else changed. If I sell one day, it will be because I chose to, not because Richard frightened me. She deleted the offer, walked uphill, and picked up the chalk line. Inspector Davis arrived 2 days early. Richard's sedan followed. "The Weather Service upgraded tomorrow's front," Davis said. 40-mile-per-hour winds, higher gusts off the lake. I received a supplemental hazard complaint. Richard gestured toward the open span. "Temporary timber under a detached roof." Davis ignored him. "Show me the shoring." I walked him through Priya's drawings, anchors, braces, jack capacities, and inspection logs. Priya joined by video. Davis checked every connection. "The vertical system complies," he said. "The storm creates lateral risk. I need both beams seated, the central post loaded, and primary pegs installed by 5 tomorrow." Our milestone was 3 days away, Elena said. "Safety conditions changed. And if we miss it?" Red tag, evacuation, condemnation hearing Monday. Richard looked at her. My offer remains open until sunset. She never turned. Davis handed me the revised notice. Full fall protection. If the wind reaches Priya's shutdown limit, everyone comes down. Understood. After they left, Elena read the notice twice. Can we finish safely? Not can you save it. Can we finish? I studied the prepared mortises, anchored post base, and weather window. Yes, 2 more crew, Priya on call, first beam tonight, second at dawn. If anything crosses the safety limit, we stop. And lose the house? The house is not worth a body. Her eyes held mine. Tell me what to do. Marcus returned with Luis and Devon. We erected rated scaffold, guardrails, and independent lifelines. Elena cleared the work zone and arranged every peg, bolt, and bracket in labeled trays. The first beam rose after dark. Harness clipped. I guided it from the scaffold while Marcus ran the hoist and Luis controlled the west line. Elena called alignment from beyond the drop zone. 6 inches clockwise, Luis corrected. 2 inches high on Caleb's side. I adjusted the chain. 1/2 hold. The tenon entered the mortise. I checked the shoulder. No gap. Set it. The oak dropped home with a deep thud. Elena pressed her palm to the central post. The house did not move. First beam seated. Someone behind Marcus cheered. He denied it later. The lift had taken 6 hours to prepare and seconds to finish. I checked the bearing. No gap, no crushed fibers, no twist. Elena touched the fresh-cut oak. It feels warm. Friction from the fit. I hoped you'd say the house approved. Marcus lowered the hoist chain. No objection filed. Her tired laugh changed the whole porch. We installed temporary pins and stopped before fatigue made us careless. Bowls of soup waited in the kitchen. Part of the contract? Luis asked. Bribery, Elena said. Effective bribery, Marcus replied. Sawdust marked her grandfather's flannel. My hands warmed around black coffee, and for one quiet meal, the house felt less like a rescue site than a place expecting people to return. Before we returned to work, Elena brought out her grandfather's porch sketch. The paper had softened along the folds and one corner carried a coffee ring. He left a note beside the old beam, she said. I angled the work light across the faded pencil. Build for weather, not applause. The words had survived longer than the timber. Elena looked from the sketch to the new oak above us. He trusted this house to someone he would never meet. Every builder does, and now I'm trusting it to you. Rain tapped the windows. I folded the page along its old crease and returned it with both hands. Then we finished it the way he asked. She tucked the sketch inside the permit folder beside Richard's deadline. Memory and proof, protected beneath the same cover. At dawn, the lake was steel gray. We lifted the second beam before the first rain band. The tenon stopped a 1/4 inch short. Do not force it, Priya said through the video call. Overnight moisture had raised a ridge inside the mortise. I lowered the beam and took up a slick chisel. You could trim the tenon, Elena said, holding the work light as rain tapped the tarp. That weakens the load-bearing face. How long? 20 minutes? The wind tugged harder. We have 20, one shaving at a time. I cleared the ridge. On the second lift, the joint seated cleanly. By noon, both beams rested on the central post. Davis checked the drawings, anchors, moisture, bearings, and shoulders. Approved. Install the pegs. The rain thickened. Wind struck the scaffold in hard pulses while Elena called alignment from below. When the second joint seated, she closed her eyes for one heartbeat, then logged the time and lifted the next peg. The first 5 entered cleanly. The 6th fought every strike as rain slicked my gloves. Richard would search for a missing signature. The storm searched for a weak joint. Neither could be given one. Thunder rolled beyond the lake. Davis checked the meter. 15 minutes before shutdown. 2 pegs remained. Marcus met my eyes. "We finished safely," I said. 8 drawbore pegs would lock the frame. 6 were seated before the wind reached 30 miles per hour. Priya's shutdown limit was 35 sustained. 2 left, Marcus said. Davis checked his meter. 32. Harnessed to separate lifelines. Marcus and I climbed opposite scaffold towers. Elena remained below the barrier with Davis. I drove the 7th peg halfway. Wind roared through the pines. A branch crashed in the yard. 34, Davis called. Finish the active strike. The next blow pulled the oak tight across the span. Marcus seated the 8th. A scaffold tie snapped. The redundant tie caught the platform after a brief shift. Down! We descended immediately. The meter touched 36, and Davis closed the work zone. The primary frame was pinned. Only secondary hardware and final inspection remained. For one heartbeat, the platform shifted beneath me, and Elena's face sharpened through the rain. She stayed behind the barrier exactly as the rescue plan required. My boots hit the ground. Her fingers bent the plastic folder. "Are you hurt?" I opened and closed both hands. No. Only then did she breathe. Davis tagged the scaffold closed. No one argued. The storm could take our remaining minutes. It would not take one of us. Richard arrived at 4:51 carrying an umbrella and a folder. "The work is incomplete." "The primary structure is loaded and pinned," Davis said. "The notice requires all hardware by 5. Elena crossed the rain with the permit file. The stamped addendum lists the remaining retaining pins as finish hardware. The primary connections are complete. Davis read the tabbed page beneath the porch light. She is correct. A gust struck the house. Siding shuddered and gutters overflowed, but the oak frame did not move. Davis checked the post and our original laser mark. No movement. At 4:58, the structural milestone is passed. No red tag. "You are protecting her from an unsafe property," Richard said. "I am documenting a compliant repair." Richard faced Elena. "My offer expires now." She closed the file, then let it. He drove away as the storm bent the pines. Relief lasted less than a minute. A crack sounded from the east wall. Stone. Runoff from the hillside had overwhelmed an old drain and washed soil from the foundation corner. Davis cleared the area while Priya reviewed the video. "The bearing pier is stable," she said, "but continuing washout could undermine the corner." Elena looked uphill. There was an old stone channel above the garden. Grandfather covered it after the retaining wall went in. She led us to flat stones hidden beneath ivy. Roots and leaves had blocked the channel, sending water toward the house. From safe ground, Marcus and Luis cut roots while I pulled debris. Elena directed us from one of her grandfather's site drawings. Water broke through and rushed toward the lake. We packed the washed area with stone and covered it. Priya approved the temporary measure and required permanent drainage before sign-off. Mud covered us to the elbows. "You remembered the channel," I said. "I used to draw beside it." "You saved the corner." "We saved it." Inside, the power flickered. Elena lit oil lamps, Marcus found towels, and Luis uncovered the soup. We gathered around the kitchen table while the storm struck the windows. Elena filled my cup. Black, she no longer asked. By morning, the wind had passed. The beams carried the roof without measurable deflection. The reopened channel kept the foundation dry. Broken branches covered the lawn, but the porch line remained straight. Davis returned at 9. Priya came in person. Richard's sedan slowed at the drive, then continued past. Davis reviewed the permit, drawings, logs, anchor records, drainage repair, foundation pier, bearings, pegs, and secondary hardware. He checked every connection before setting his brass level against the central post. The bubble rested between the lines. He handed it to Elena. "Check it." She placed the level herself. Dead center. Davis signed the yellow page. Hazard remediated, condemnation review closed. The purchase trigger never activated. "Can insurance be restored?" Elena asked. "With this report and Priya's certificate, and the house?" Priya touched the oak. "Safer than the day it was built." "Code exceeded," Davis said. Marcus leaned toward me. "You'll frame that." "I have standards." "You have an empty shop wall." Elena looked at the signature and laughed. The sound traveled through the open doorway into the rooms her family had built. Richard challenged the permit and lost. County records proved Elena had met every milestone, and old correspondence showed her grandfather had asked Richard to release the purchase agreement, rather than defend himself in court. Richard terminated it. Insurance was restored. Elena's lake house illustrations funded the first deferred payment installment, then grew into a profitable series on historic homes. Marcus returned for the interior repairs, claiming the hallway floor offended him. Priya said he came for Elena's coffee. I completed the siding, drywall, and permanent drainage under a new contract. When the final invoice was signed, I removed every tool and waited. The professional work had to end before anything else began. 3 days later, Elena asked me to meet her on the dock. The lake was still. Sunset turned the restored windows gold. From the water, the house matched her grandfather's watercolor again, porch straight, roof secure, pines rising behind it. She wore his faded flannel over a work shirt and carried 2 coffees and a rolled drawing. She handed me the black one. "What is that?" "My next project." The drawing showed a timber workshop near the north edge of the property, with a drafting room and a separate illustration studio. "You drew a shop?" "I drew 2 workspaces, separate leases, accounts, and contracts. My attorney drafted the terms." "You planned this with your attorney?" "I learned from a painfully cautious carpenter." She held out a brass key. "The old boathouse, your temporary workshop, while we decide whether to build this." "We?" "If you want the word." Wind carried pine and fresh-cut oak across the lake. The old brass key was worn bright along one edge. It was not a romantic symbol. It was access with terms, trust with a lock, and a future neither of us had to pretend was finished. "A shared project isn't the same as a shared life," I said. "I know. I'm asking whether you want to build something near mine. We can decide the rest slowly." "Working beside me may make you reconsider." "I watched you sort screws by length after midnight. This is an informed decision." "That was an emergency system." "That was a personality." I laughed and closed my hand around the key. Slowly, then, I retrieved my field notebook and opened to a blank page. "Where does the morning light fall?" "Across the east wall." "Then the drafting room belongs there." We spent an hour measuring sight lines, the first plan we had chosen together. As the light faded, Elena rested her arms on the dock rail and looked back at the house. Porch lamps warmed the cedar siding. The new oak carried the roof without asking to be noticed. "It finally looks like home again," she said. I stood beside her. "One day, it'll be ours." "The house stays mine," she said, raising one eyebrow. I smiled. "I meant the life." Her hand found mine. "That can be ours." Behind us, the laser level rested in my open case. Its red line crossed the dock rail, straight, steady, and true. The end.